It's 1:38 a.m. Time for Octoberpod. Good morning. This is Edward October. Our lives, for good or for ill, are governed by chance. Something as insignificant as the snooze button, delayed flight, a traffic jam, or a set of misplaced keys could very well mean the difference between life and death, between this world and the next, between here and where. This morning, we give you two tales of chance encounters with a strange destiny. Two lives forever changed, one by an impromptu work break, and one by a walk taken in the wrong park on the wrong morning. We invite you to press your luck with Street Toast, narrated by Cam, co-host of our true crime podcast, and Meat Dog Man, based on true accounts submitted by Breeanna Arndt and Gabriel, 13-6.
I work at a small nonprofit in downtown Baltimore. It's not the best part of town, but God knows it's not the worst. Now, I've never been afraid of working at this location. However, there's a quiet but very visible homeless population. There's a park, well, it's a strip of grass with benches, across the street that houses a small tent city. There's a couple of panhandlers and a handful of transients who I frequently see along the sidewalks, but they never bother anyone. One guy, who's always out, was given the perhaps unkind nickname of Street Toast. Now this is on account of his t-shirt he's always wearing. Janine, up in HR, says it's Wonder Bread shirt with a picture of some bread popping out of a toaster, but the writing on it's too faded to make out a logo. Anyway, Street Toast was a short man in his 50s. Life on the street made him look 60-something, with a patchy white beard. He always wore ragged blue jeans and a nasty old trucker hat. He walked with a cane, probably standard issue from the VA hospital not far away. Nice guy, never bothered anyone. So I f***ing hate my job. Nonprofits are demanding and low paying. Whenever I get a chance, I'll sneak over to the bodega across the street and use their Wi-Fi. I usually just stand outside, stare at my phone, you know. But on this particular day, we were having a cold snap. So I decided to step into the lobby that the bodega shares with the property management office. I had my head buried in my phone and didn't notice that the man who'd opened the door for me was Street Toast. No, I wasn't afraid of the guy. I didn't have anything against him or homeless folks in general. I just didn't want to talk to anyone at that moment, you know. But he was dead set on striking up a conversation. I tried my best to ignore him. It didn't take. He told me he lived in the tent over there and pointed with his cane. Said he had just come inside to warm up and decided to open the door for paying customers so that nobody from the bodega or the office runs him off. Now, truth be told, I had a million questions I wanted to ask him. How did you end up homeless? Are you frightened living by yourself on the street? What's the most effed up thing you've ever seen? But I didn't ask him any of that. I just stared at my phone. I guess it was a big news day for celebrity gossip. He told me he was waiting on a ride from his brother. Said his brother was going to let him stay with him for the winter. I smiled and told him they were predicting snow over the weekend and colder temperatures to boot. So you picked a good time to get away. And I'll never forget this. He just stared off in the distance with his icy blue eyes and said, "Yes, I did. Yes, I did." That was it. Went back to work. Didn't think a thing of it. Next morning, I come to work and I saw a big hubbub going on across the street. Squad cars with lights on. They were seeming to comb through the tent city. Sidewalk was closed down. When I got to my desk, I asked my coworker if he knew what was going on. The guy said it was a sad story. They pulled one of those homeless guys out of the tent, frozen to death. It was that guy, Street Toast. Remember him? He's the guy. I shook my head and I told him it was a shame because I was just talking to Street Toast yesterday. My coworker scrunched up his face and shook his head. You must have been talking to somebody else. The security guard downstairs said that Street Toast had been dead for 3 days before anyone found him.
Word started to get out there was a new enforcer in town. No one knew if she was a demon or an angel. Perhaps a mythical mix of both. Maybe the woman in the black hat was one of the old gods that wandered this land before the lash of the cross was introduced. The only thing anyone knew was that no human could run from their devious deeds if Maria and her fist caught you in their sights. Maria, the wanted. Maria is a wanted woman. She's wanted by an Aztec trafficker, a cartel boss, the people she fights for, and now the devil she can't resist. Her journey begins as a would-be immigrant turned vampire, until the injustices of the world turn her into something else. She's not just out for blood. She wants answers. Maria the Wanted, and the Legacy of the Keepers. Available on Amazon for paperback and Kindle. Follow on Instagram and Twitter at VLatinaLondon. Hello, Ed. This is Gabriel from Johnson City, the cultural mecca of all that is Northeast Tennessee. I wanted to write in to tell you the 2 most frightening things that ever happened to me. I believe they're somehow related, but perhaps you can judge for yourself. Maybe you can tell me. When I was a kid, maybe 6 years old, I was asleep in the top bunk of the bunk beds I shared with my brother. I woke up, but couldn't move or open my eyes or breathe or scream. I was awake, but there were multiple black things holding me down, keeping my eyes and mouth closed. It felt like forever, but probably only lasted a minute or so. Whatever had hold of me wouldn't let go. I looked below at my brother, sleeping on the bottom bunk, peacefully. I breathed for a second and then jumped down to the floor. As I was running to my parents' room, I heard the voice of the ghost or entity or whatever it was that had me. It whispered, "By God, you better have somebody with you." I slept in Mom and Dad's bed for weeks. One of the most terrifying nights of my childhood. Well, like I said, that was years ago. Now, what happened next? I was 22 at the time. Just got out of college with a bachelor's in theater. I'd gotten myself a job as a performer at Dollywood. There are horror movies of a very different kind to be told about that experience. I was a singer, dancer, jazz, tap, folk, and hip-hop, and actor. I was a triple threat. So I lived in Sevierville, Tennessee with a roommate who also had a Dollywood gig. For anyone not familiar, Dollywood is smack dab in the middle of what some call the Redneck Riviera. It's in Pigeon Forge, which is nothing but attractions and country music stuff. Gatlinburg, the next town over, is more attractions, shops, restaurants, and skiing. Sevierville's on the other side, and it's nothing but outlets and fireworks emporiums. Most folks only see the parts of these towns that tourists are meant to see. But if you live there, it's a different experience. You know all the less traveled roads and live your lives in places tourists never go. I hear Venice, Italy is similar, with a hidden city just beneath the surface, but I digress. Whenever I had some time off, I like to go take long walks at this little park. Again, one of these places where tourists never go. It was connected to a church or a school, I never figured out which, and had a playground with a little gravel path going around it in a little circle. It wasn't quite a track, but it meandered through some trees and made for a pleasant walk or jog. One night, I had a nightmare about the ghost I'd seen as a kid. This time, I knew it was a dream because I didn't have the sensation of being held down, and the rest of the dream was kind of obviously unreal. Anyway, I couldn't sleep, so I got up just before dawn and drove out to the park for a walk. It was a crisp morning in the springtime. We'd had some rain the previous day, and everything was misty and wet. I parked my car in a gravel lot on a bank overlooking the park. It was just misty enough that I could only see vague impressions of the brightly colored playground equipment. Oh, and I forgot to mention, there were no other cars parked in the lot. So I get out of the car and started walking down the path. Like I said earlier, the path was more or less the shape of a donut, going around the outside of the playground. About a lap in, I noticed a figure standing a couple yards from where I was parked. Now, I hadn't heard another car pull up, so I just assumed he'd walked over from a cluster of condos adjacent to the wooded edge of the park. Didn't think nothing of it. People are always walking their dogs at odd hours. In fact, there was a dog sniffing around in some brush a couple steps away from him. It was still too misty to make out his features, but I walked on by without speaking to him. Next lap, he's standing just at the edge of the park, and the sun had risen enough to evaporate a lot of the mist. As I came around that time, I could see him more clearly. I'd say he was a dude in his 40s, slim to medium build, olive complexion, and dark hair that was kind of greasy and mussed up like he just rolled out of bed. 5 o'clock shadow, wearing old dirty blue coveralls and steel-toed work boots that looked about a size too big. I figured him to be a mechanic or something. Definitely appeared out of place for this park at this hour. He carried a rust-colored water bottle, like one of those big Nalgene bottles. This was all odd, but I still didn't think too much of it. You throw a rock in Tennessee, you're bound to hit somebody in coveralls. So I passed again without either of us speaking. But as I walked by this time, he fell in behind me. Not close, but moving at what you'd call a deliberate pace. At this point, the rational part of my brain was telling me this was just a guy off for a stroll with his dog. Nothing sinister about it. But a more primitive part of my brain told me to get moving. So I told my rational self I'd do one more lap and head to the car. I told my primitive self that I'd be real quick about it. I guess you'd say I started speed walking. So I stepped onto the wooded bend that marked the midpoint of the lap. I was now about an equal distance from my car in either direction. I saw a shape emerging from one of the trees. It was this guy's dog. The last time I'd seen this dog, it was sniffing around near the parking area. I had no idea how it gotten to this end of the path without me seeing. This dog was a mutt, but pretty big. I'd say he had a little German shepherd and a lot of traveling salesmen in him. It was a strange looking dog. Not just because it was a mixed breed, but because of the meat. You see, at first this dog looked injured. Bloody cuts and wounds, all kinds of bloody gore on him. But the dog was perfectly fine, healthy. It was covered in raw meat. It looked like it had ground beef, ground lamb, and thin, streaky strips of something looking like bacon or prosciutto matted into its coat. And this dog had an odor like a broken refrigerator full of rancid cold cuts. Now how the does a dog get covered in raw meat? And wouldn't the dog just try to eat it off if he was? Before I could even think about the unsettling way the dog was looking at me, the man in the blue coveralls appeared right at my shoulders and said, "Thirsty?" We were both still walking. I was trying to put distance between me and the dog, but Blue Coveralls was keeping up my pace. He held out his water bottle to me. Now I could see that the water bottle wasn't brown or rust-colored. It was the water itself. I must have made a face because next he goes, "It's okay, see?" and started pouring the liquid from the bottle onto his mouth without actually drinking it. I mean, what the actual f***? Now my primitive brain took over completely, and I started sprinting towards the car, not staying on the path, just cutting straight through the park using the fastest route between point A and point B. The man didn't follow me. At least that's what I thought. Instead, he just shouted the dog's name. It was a single syllable like Shep or Chet or Kip. And then the dog took off after me. I don't know how I did it, but cousin, that dog could move. But I made it to the car before the dog could pounce on me. I locked all the doors and started the engine. When I looked up, the man was standing just about 6 inches away from the driver's side window. The dog was at his side. And he just looked at me and said, "By God, you better have somebody with you." I threw the car in reverse and didn't worry about anybody's toes. As I was backing out, I saw the man stick out his tongue and pour the brown liquid onto it, still not actually drinking it, just letting it trickle down his chin and the front of his dirty coveralls. A girl I worked with at Dollywood, she'd been mugged a couple months earlier, convinced me to file a police report. The officer I spoke to told me that the man in blue coveralls matched the description of a person of interest in a number of missing persons cases. All of them boys aged 16 to 22. This officer told me, unofficially, off the record, that one of the missing boys turned up dead. Theory was he'd been abducted, drugged, raped, and asphyxiated. Bruising about the eyes and mouth. Bite marks were all over the body, as though he'd been chewed on by a dog. This officer told me I was awfully lucky I'd gotten away from this man. What keeps me up at night is the thought that the man in blue coveralls is somehow connected to my childhood ghost encounter. Why did he say, "By God, you better have somebody with you"? The exact words the ghost had whispered. And if I hadn't had a nightmare about the ghost, I wouldn't have been in the park that morning. Was the ghost trying to warn me about this man all those years ago? Or was the man in blue coveralls somehow in league with the entity that had haunted me as a child? Nothing ever came of my police report. As far as I know, the meat dog man is still out there.
Hi, I'm Melissa Cummins from The Haunted Ride, a paranormal podcast dedicated to you and your experiences. I know what it's like to have something happen to you that's unexplainable, and how it feels to want to tell someone but you're concerned they may think you're crazy. Whether it's a disembodied voice, an apparition, or something you just can't explain, this is your place to share it. So come tune in with me every week while we discuss anything and everything that falls into our paranormal and supernatural world. Because ghosts are out there, and if you're not careful, they will get you.
Hey guys, my name is Tara.
And my name is Jessica, and together we co-host the podcast, Three Spooked Girls.
If you love the paranormal
Or murder.
Join us every Monday as we tell our listeners about a new spooky tale or true crime case.
We'll have a special drink recipe each episode picked out by me for you to enjoy while we scare the hell out of you.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever the hell else you listen to podcasts.
Come hang out with us and get your spooky on.
Hey guys, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Stephanie.
And we're the hosts of Dead Time Stories. Dead Time Stories
With a Z.
is a weekly podcast where we tell you stories of ghosts, hauntings, mysteries, conspiracies,
The supernatural, paranormal,
the generally eerie, spooky,
and all around weird.
If you like scary stories, witty banter, and classy broads,
we're your ghouls.
Gals.
New episodes are posted Thursdays at midnight on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, and Stitcher.
Listen and subscribe, rate and review today.